How many people here are familiar with today's saint, Saint Josemaria Escrivá? A couple of you. How many of you have ever heard of the Catholic group Opus Dei? Many more of you. Saint Josemaria is the founder of Opus Dei. So Saint Josemaria was born in Spain in 1902 and raised in a good Catholic family. As a young man, he wanted to be an architect. But all of that changed one winter day when young Josemaria saw a set of footprints in the snow. He noticed that the footprints were not made by shoes or boots, but by somebody's bare feet. He picked up his pace and he followed the footprints, only to find that they were being made by a Carmelite monk who was walking barefoot in the snow as a sacrifice that he made out of love for God and in imitation of Jesus crucified. Well, young Josemaria's heart was so moved by what this Carmelite monk was willing to do for God that he felt compelled to ask God, "And what do you want me to do for you, Lord, if this monk can do this for you?" And he immediately perceived that God was calling him to become a priest. So he entered the seminary, and as his vocation matured and developed, he began to sense that God was asking of him something even greater than just to be a priest. That God was asking him to carry out some special work, and that was why he had called him to be a priest. He found out what that was on October 2nd, 1928, the Feast of the Guardian Angels, when he was just 26 years old. He was on retreat. He had just celebrated Mass and eaten breakfast. He went back to his room and he was looking through some notes from some past retreats, and all of a sudden he had a vision of a spirituality and an institution. And though he spoke very little about that vision because he wanted to be discreet about it, he would later go on to explain that the spirituality God gave him was a spirituality focused on the universal call to holiness. The idea that everyone, not just priests and nuns, but everyone is called to be a saint. And that all you have to do to achieve that goal is to do your work well, to fulfill the obligations of your state in life for the glory of God. If you're a doctor, be the best doctor you can be. If you're a janitor, be the best janitor you can be. If you're a homemaker, do your very best for the glory of God to take care of your family and your kids. And Josemaria would even say to priests, if you're a priest and you want to be a saint, be the best priest you can be. And doing this, all of us can become holy. That was the spirituality, and then the institution that God inspired him to found on that day back in 1928 was Opus Dei, which would be an institution that would consist of celibate and married members who would try their best to live the spirituality in the world and to be a support to other people who were trying to live it. Now, when Josemaria began preaching this message, he was met with a lot of misunderstanding. He was even called a heretic. How dare he say that mere lay people could become saints? People did not understand that back in the 1930s. They really believed that only priests and nuns could become saints, and the rest of you pesky lay people were destined just to spiritual mediocrity. But Josemaria said, no, you're all called to be saints. He even went to Rome with his message, and an official in the Vatican actually told him he was 100 years too early, that the world wasn't ready for this message yet. But St. Josemaria remained undaunted, and he kept preaching to anybody who would listen to him the message of holiness for all people through prayer and ordinary work. And as happens so often with saints and prophets, after a lot of suffering and a lot of time, he was vindicated finally by the Church. The Second Vatican Council in the early 1960s solemnly taught that all Catholics, regardless of their state in life, are called to holiness. And the popes from Vatican II on, especially John Paul II, demonstrated that by canonizing more lay people than ever before, so as to show the world that the Church doesn't just canonize priests and nuns, the Church canonizes everybody because everybody's called to be a saint. St. Josemaria died on this day, June 26, 1975. It's been exactly 45 years since his death, and a little over 90 years since he first had that vision on the Feast of the Guardian Angels. And yet, after all these years, his message about the universal call to holiness is still very little known, very little accepted, and very little put into practice. So since today is his feast day, in his honor, I would like to say to all of the lay people here present, and I think that's everybody here except me, you are called to become a saint. You can become a saint. You must strive to become a saint, and you don't have to do anything out of the ordinary to become one. May Saint Josemaria Escrivá intercede from heaven for all of us here on earth, that we may achieve the goal that he spent his whole life teaching and preaching about: holiness. Saint Josemaria Escrivá, pray for us.